This is episode 14 of the Gambling Still Sucks podcast. In this episode, Michelle joins the show to share her story, and we talk about a lot of other topics, including women and gambling, as well as the effect of a new casino that is close by. Hey there, everyone. This is Jamie. I am a compulsive gambler. The last time I gambled was July 15th of 2010. I am excited, especially after all the feedback we had on Rob's episode, to quickly get another interview up. And so today I am joined by Michelle. Hey, Michelle.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that you were willing and able to come on the show and share a little bit about your story. So looking forward to hearing your story.
I'm looking forward to sharing.
So I guess same thing with Rob. I'd like to just start off, if you could take a chance and kind of introduce yourself, kind of give a little bit about your personal background, just kind of paint the picture of who you are so people can kind of have an idea in their mind.
Sure. So it just happens to be happenstance that I am somehow right down the street from both you and Rob. You know, I know that your podcast has a lot farther reach than just northeastern Ohio, but just random happenstance. And another thing that we have in common, I actually a former poker player myself, and I reached the same level that you and Rob had both reached. I think we share that, as well as quite a bit of online playing as well. Poker was, I would say, 90% of it for me, and some blackjack as well. But when it came to blackjack, there was zero moderation. I mean, it was full speed ahead from day one. And we can get into it a little more, but I'll just say that my degenerate blackjack behavior is what really pushed me to what I, at the time, thought was more regulated, more less degenerate poker playing. I thought poker would be the cure to my blackjack playing. So that's more or less a little bit about my background and how it kind of progressed for me.
Yeah, and for everyone out there, Michelle and I have actually never met. And we do live, about 30, 40 minutes away at the most.
Yeah. I mean, if we had, there's probably a very unlikely chance that we've even run into each other, just because my poker playing, the majority of it happened in the last 5 years. Well, you are clearly no longer involved in the game. So yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah, and Rob and I joke, we would go to some of the same places. And so I know we've probably been to at least in the same building. But yeah, the Cleveland poker scene has changed rapidly in the last 7 years. And now that we have casinos here, and it's no longer the charity poker, which was where I frequented. But it's just kind of interesting. You always, and I know I always felt so alone and different, and there's nobody else out there. And all of a sudden in the last month and a half, 2 months, when I've kind of gotten this started and jump on Twitter, just on Twitter, yourself, and then there's another gentleman that, is right in the backyard, and we're going to meet up and have lunch, and it's kind of cool. But I don't know. I think that's kind of the cool thing about social media and the internet is it provides that connection. It's amazing.
And him and I know who you're talking about, and him and I have also kind of bonded over this. And it's so helpful that there are people like yourself advocating for those that don't know where to go or who to reach out to. You're letting people know that they're not alone, and that there are places they can go and things that they can do. And it's as easy as basically a mouse click away. And I think what's helpful, and people need to really understand how to take advantage of some of these services and tools. Social media or the internet allows the people that still want to be anonymous to have their anonymity. People that still have a difficult time picking themselves up and walking into a physical meeting have the option to do it behind a screen. Whether that's good or not in their long-term recovery, it's not for me to judge, but I think it just makes things more accessible for people with less effort. I hate to say it like that, but that's kind of what it is.
No, absolutely. It's a baby step, right? And that's
For sure.
one of the big things with the podcast was, okay, most people, myself included, nobody wants to go to GA. Like, it's not, you don't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm really excited because I'm going to go to my first GA meeting. It's completely the opposite. And so my whole thought was, okay, I listen to a ton of podcasts, and it's a way to sort of get people comfortable, like you say, that connection. And even going back to like when I first started with the Twitter handle, like it was, I didn't have my location on. And it was, like you said, that ability to stay anonymous to whatever degree you want.
Right. Absolutely. I think, I don't know, there are two different types of people that get involved in 12-step programs. There are the people that throw themselves fully into the program completely in every way of the word. They are completely immersed. And what's more important for them are the 12 steps and their own recovery, and then eventually helping others, that their anonymity almost plays no role. Like, people just know who some of these people are. And then there are the types of people that are a little apprehensive, and they don't want to give away too much about themselves, and they're concerned about their reputations in the community once they expose their issues. And this kind of allows for whatever your level or your needs are. You can be who you want to be and how you want to. You can more or less create your own path to recovery, which should be hopefully inviting to those that had reservations at any point.
Absolutely. So I guess let's go back. We've kind of talked about how we don't know each other. And like, this is one of the awesome things about the internet and the connecting. And like you say, I mean, it's cool to see downloads in the UK and Australia and all around the world. And kind of the issue is so universal. So I guess first, let's just go back. What are some of your early thoughts or memories on gambling? How did you get into it? What was the progression through it?
My grandparents actually were huge card players, and I have 7 cousins, and every Friday night we'd sleep at my grandparents' house, and maybe every other weekend they'd have their friends over while all the kids were there, and they would play Maj or bridge or poker. They, chose different games every single week. And really early on, like 7 or 8 years old, I was extremely close with my grandpa. I would look over his shoulder and play with him for hours on end. I would be his eyes and ears, and I caught on so quickly. I mean, it was something that it appealed to me. I don't know. I can't explain how or why, but it just was what it was. And then I played a little bit on and off in high school. I was always one of the guys. I had a pretty solid group of male friends, and I just hung out with them on the weekends, and they would run games, casual games. And if they were for money, they were for, pennies. It was nothing ever sizable and nothing that I remembered. And trust me, if there was money involved, I probably would remember. And then I went to school. I went to college on the East Coast, and I went to grad school on the East Coast. So I spent a lot of time. I was in Boston for undergrad, and then I was in New York City for grad school. I spent a lot of time in Atlantic City, and it wasn't habitual, but just to get out of New York City for a couple hours on a Saturday, I would maybe go once a month and play whatever. It wasn't. I didn't play poker in the casino at that point, but as a diversion, I would play blackjack, very little slots. And, looking back, I can see some of those day trips where my judgment was, let's just say, questionable. Like, not in my actions, but just in remembering how I felt. Just the compulsivity was starting to kind of move in a little bit. Nothing really happened other than I, graduated school and moved back to Ohio, and there weren't any casinos here, and I wasn't really playing in any active poker games at that point. And then right around the time that all the moneymaker stuff happened and online poker blew up was when I was starting my professional career. And I had just gotten married right around the same time. This is like in the early 2000s. And I would come home from work and turn on the computer for like a half hour or an hour and load $50 onto an account. Like, I don't know what even inspired me to download any of those poker skins at the time and to play, but somehow somebody was talking about it one day at work, and I went home and just began playing. I'm trying to think back now if there was really any impetus to it. I guess there really was not. But just as my mode of relaxation, I would walk through the door, and the computer was in the office right by the front door. I would go in there for a half an hour, decompress. And because I was in a new marriage, like, I was still feeling my way around the relationship quite a bit. This was my sanctuary and my place to just go let off steam and then spend the night with my spouse. And, sometimes I won, sometimes I lost. At that point, I certainly wasn't playing the game that I eventually was playing. It was much more of a diversion. And my significant other really was into poker, but he had no idea what he was doing and wanted to learn. He was, I think, more into watching it than participating in it. And he started having his male friends over, like maybe once a month, and we would run a regular game. And that was really my first go at live poker, playing seriously. And I don't know if it was a combination of studying and skill or just dumb luck, but I had amazing success. I would literally wipe out his friends like almost every single time that we had a game. And this went on for, I don't know, about a year. And my playing with the guys live and then my playing online, like, they fed into each other. Like, the more that I did one, the more I'd want to do the other. For whatever reason, our live game dissolved after, like I said, after about a year. And after about 18 months or so, my online playing kind of like fizzled out a little bit too. I was still focused on work, extremely focused on work. And we also had started a family, and I didn't have that urge to keep playing. Like, I wanted other things in my life. And I'd say when I stopped playing, maybe like 2005 or so, I didn't start again until the casino in Cleveland, which I think this was 2012. Tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe 11, till the casino opened again.
Sounds about right.
Okay. So yeah, like, I had a couple trips to Vegas, nothing worth really discussing, and maybe a couple like local casino trips. By local, I mean in like a 3-state area in between then. And that was really it. I still stayed interested. Like, I would read poker news and whatnot, and I knew what was going on within the community, but I certainly was not any sort of diehard the way that I eventually ended up being. When the casino opened in Cleveland, like, the gloves came off immediately. It was pretty insane, and it ramped up pretty quickly. So I can get into that a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, let's get into it in a second. But first, I think this just highlights, your story from the start. Like you said, sitting on your grandfather's lap and kind of that family aspect of it. And then, you're in college and it's just casual, right? It's the prototypical what the gaming industry says. Oh, it's fun, it's entertainment, it's relaxation. I think you said, like, it was a way to decompress. Absolutely, for sure. It was a bonding thing, It's in, not just with family, but with friends. And I have always said this, and I still stand by it. It brings people together. These types of activities, especially, and I hate to stay focused just on poker, but poker brings together groups of people that would otherwise never be sitting around a table together, from all different walks of life, from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, from, any demographic. It joins people together more than it pulls people away from each other. So there are some positive characteristics of it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, maybe we need to have a poker game as the front, but then actually not have a poker game and just make people sit in a room and talk to each other. So right. Well, and now, listen, for what it's worth, I guess the game of poker is still at least bringing all of us together, because somehow we found each other, So No, absolutely. And that's,
like it or not.
yeah. And I think in your story, I mean, it's similar to mine. It's similar to Rob's. It's similar to every story I've heard over 7.5 years. Is sort of that progression, right? We start
Right.
off and it's just
Yes.
it's casual. It's not much money. It's infrequent. Then it's a little more frequent and a little more money. And then it's a
Yep.
lot more. And I mean, really, like you said, when you came back to Ohio, a big part was we didn't have casinos. You had to drive to Detroit in Michigan. You had to, I mean, it was 2 to 3 hours to a casino.
Right. Like when you did it, when you decided to play or to do it, it was a commitment.
Yeah, you were a little all in. It's like I'm going to do this like all the way. I'm not going to drive 2.5 hours and just like lose a buy-in or lose whatever you started with and then go home.
Right. It's always at least a day. No, well, no, never.
Yeah. And for everyone out there, a little background, the casino in Cleveland, I like to call it the casino that LeBron brought us because the state of Ohio had gambling on the ballot many, many times, always voted down, always voted down. Well, then Dan Gilbert, who is founded Quicken Loans and he's the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was trying to bring casinos to Ohio. And he owns a couple of the ones that are here. And at the time, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the basketball team, were really, really good. And it's because LeBron, who's from Akron, where I'm from, and plays in Cleveland, and he's back here now again, the team was awesome. And there was such a positive sentiment towards the Cavs and like Dan Gilbert along with that because he was the owner and he was the one that was bringing all the success. And so when the ballot came up, all of a sudden, I think it was about 2009, 2010, I mean, the Cavs had just been to the finals. It might have been in the ballot on even like '08. The Cavs were in the finals in 2007. And so everybody loved Dan Gilbert. And so it's Dan's casino. He'll do well, like all that type of stuff. And so now, fast forward 10 years later, we have multiple casinos and yeah.
Well, and not to interject, but I will interject.
No, of course.
At that point also, and this was a huge selling point, it was when it first opened, it was a Caesars entertainment casino. So, people that had been regular Vegas visitors or Atlantic City, their comps and their points, their total reward system was what was here. It was the Horseshoe. And so because it was adjoined with that casino group, I don't know so much that people that were not in the know were aware, but a lot of their comps they were transferable all around the country. So that, I think having the Caesars name attached to them, or Harrah's, let's say, was tremendous. And it turned out for me specifically to be a huge, huge thing. I didn't go right away. I'll tell you this. So the casino opened in May, and I remember people talking about how there were lines out the door to sit down at least outside of the poker room, the lines to sit down at either 1-3 or the 2-5 tables were insane. The waiting lists were, I don't know, 12 tables deep. The lines to get in and sign up for a player's card were insane. Like, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's Black Friday shopping, going into a casino, or waiting to eat at the best restaurant in the world that's giving away food. I'm never waiting in a line for anything like that. I'm just too impatient, and nothing is so important that it can't wait. At least when I'm thinking logically, that's the case. But I waited several months to go. I don't think I went until October of the same year for the first time. And I happened to be going to the comedy club that was right down the street with a couple friends on a Saturday night. And we had an hour and a half to blow. And they said, let's just stop into the casino. And I signed up for a player's card right away as soon as we walked in. And they entered all the new signups into some raffle. There's always some sort of crazy promotion. And I didn't think much about it. Like, just like with any players club thing, whatever promotion I think if I remember correctly, like if you sign up for a new card, you get entered into a raffle and you get $20 of free slot play. And that was the whole idea. Like, I thought, well, if we have an hour and a half to blow, I'll just play the free slot play and then we'll go. So I signed up for the card. I burned through the $20 and we're about to walk out the door, and they pulled the names out for the raffle. And before I could even make it out the door, within the first hour of being there, I ended up winning the raffle. So my love affair with the casino, the local casino at least, started immediately. Like there was not even any sort of like wooing. I mean, it was love at first sight, and we jumped right into the toxic relationship right away.
Of course. I mean, who wouldn't want to recreate that?
Absolutely. And plus, like my mentality was, well, now I have this extra $10,000 that the casino basically gave it to me. Why use it for anything like other than trying to make more money from it? So it wasn't right away, but eventually I found my way back there and proceeded to make sure that they got every penny of their money back. Put it that way.
House money, right?
Exactly.
That's probably the number one thing that works in the casino's favor, is that we don't value the money that they give us nearly as much as the money that we give them. We fight hard and earn our dollar at work, and we know how hard it is to get it. But then when they give us $1, it's like, oh, it's not worth as much.
Absolutely. That couldn't be more true. Could not be more true. I thought, another thing for me, I was, like I mentioned, pretty smart, or I thought that I was smart, and that I would take that $10,000 and find the best way to make the most money from it. So I immediately, I didn't go back to the casino. We did go to the comedy show. I didn't end up going back to the casino right away. In fact, it was probably about a week later. I went home and gave it some thought, and thought about funneling some of that money into poker, and then maybe playing a little bit of blackjack to try and double, triple, quadruple, whatever my agenda was, that money. And in the process, I found, again, Caesar's Total Rewards program, how to compound points as quickly, or comps as quickly as possible, and build my status level. So any future trips to Las Vegas or wherever else I wanted to go would be basically funded by Caesars. And Caesars is great for this. They have all types of marketing gimmicks, like, their levels. And I've talked about this quite a bit on another podcast that I was on. Their levels are gold, platinum, diamond, and then 7 stars. And everybody starts out at gold. It's worth nothing. Platinum is, I think it's 1,500 or 2,000 points, which on a low level, you can think of it like for every dollar you spend, basically. It's almost dollar for dollar, but that doesn't hold true at the higher levels. And then diamond, I believe it's maybe 10,000 points. And then 7 stars is 150,000. And Caesar's big push was helping gamblers get to diamond in a day. So for whatever reason, that was what I decided that I was going to do, whether it was, you can't do it playing poker. Poker was the least rewarded, most expensive for the casino, least rewarded game. But you could certainly do it with blackjack or slots. And I figured if I sat down at a blackjack table and played 2 to 3 hands of $200 each for 6 hours, I'd have it done. I set out to do that, and I did it. I reached diamond in a day, and I thought, okay, well, now I'm going to have access to the Diamond Lounge, which is the bar. Drinks in Ohio cannot be comped, but food can be comped, and drinks can be, I think, lowered down to like $1 or something like that. So here I am now with access to this club. I can entertain friends and clients at the casino at any point, and I was treated like royalty. And once I got a little taste of that, I immediately wanted to be the top level, the next level, and had to figure out the best way and the quickest way to get myself there. So that's kind of like how my mentality changed over time and how the progression of things unfolded for me.
No, that's really interesting. And one interesting fact about me, I guess, I've never had a rewards card. of any kind. And part was we didn't have a casino here, but yeah.
I thought about that. Like, I realized that as we were talking about it, you actually probably were never even in the casino here. So that's a whole nother aspect of a lot of this. It's what keeps in my mind, and this isn't for everybody, but for me, because I'm one of those types of people that any incentive program that's out there, I like to take advantage of, whether it be comps or flight miles or whatever it is. For me, that was what kind of kept me coming back, even after I had reached the point that I knew I was completely out of control. Like, I felt like they still owed me something. And if I could just get to the next level or the next place or the next point, that I would finally get what was coming to me. If I just spent a little bit more money, then I would have my flights taken care of, and I would have my rooms taken care of, and I'd have this taken care of and that taken care of. What I failed to see was, whether I liked it or not, whether I was getting something out of it or not, I paid for each one of those things, those flights, those meals, those hotel rooms, 20 times over before they were actually given to me. So be grateful that you didn't have that aspect of it. It's really twisted.
And a couple of the casinos I went to out of state, they had them. And my reasoning for not getting it was just kind of to be anonymous. I was always so frightened. I mean, my family had known that I had played poker and I got into trouble. And so it was just one of those things, like, to hide it. I'm like, crap, they won't add, like, I don't want to be added. And even the last day I went on the riverboat, they scanned my ID going in. And, like, I almost turned around and left because I didn't want to give them my ID, because I was like, they're going to send me mailers and somebody's going to see it. But I am guilty of the rewards thing. And I mean, I'm a marketer, so I know all the things. And I mean, the rewards are designed to build a habit, right? They want you to keep
Absolutely.
coming back. And so it's like, and they set it up and they have the science behind it. And I am guilty of sitting in my car in line. We have a new Starbucks that's real close to my house, and the line is around the building at all times. It's a pain in the ass to get in and out of. But I have a Star Wars rewards card, and they upped me right away to the higher level, and I need to maintain my higher level to get my free coffee more frequently. And yet right down the road, there is an awesome local coffee shop, locally owned, which I would like to support. And I think my values are more aligned with theirs, but they don't have the same sophisticated app. And so I sit in line at Starbucks to get my coffee, when a coffee that is just as good or better right down the road, I don't. And so, yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm guilty, like I said, of the rewards card, and it's just, they build a habit. I mean, Starbucks does you buy a coffee one day, a sandwich the next, and then a frappe the next. So they're getting you to try these different things, and they're just building a habit. And they know, okay, if somebody comes back 3 days in a row, all of a sudden when they go 2 days in a row, it's like, oh, that's not a big deal. I went 3 last week. So they just slowly shift kind of our belief system and our habits. So it's powerful stuff.
Yeah. And, we are in a place now where we're so used to having, instant gratification. And now that we know that we can have things literally in just a moment, as long as things are marketed well, they're flashy, they're easy to use, and they're accessible, there's no reason to say no. Like, we've become more or less just yes people. So I get it. I absolutely, fully, 100% get it. Another thing I think worth mentioning in my progression was, as things got deeper and deeper for me, a sense of entitlement and self-righteousness really took over for me. But I think what led up to that was, I was, through a series of life events, I ended up getting divorced in 2010. And so here I am, single, female poker player with kind of, I don't want to say I was super dramatic, but I've always been outspoken. So here I am in this place in life where the other people in the casino were mostly male, or maybe couples on weekend nights, either a lot younger or a lot older, and just different than me. And I felt like I was somebody different, something, I hate to say special, I was different than everybody else. And I was often the only female in the poker room, or one of very few females that would be there for 12 hours grinding it out. I definitely, sitting down at blackjack and playing large amounts the way that I did, was the only female around that was doing that. I did eventually get to the 7 stars level, and I was the second female in Ohio at this casino to reach that level. Like, I was trailblazing for some of the less, now looking back, the less, I don't know, prestigious types of things. So, there's a mentality that is kind of out there that gambling is a man's problem. Disordered gambling is really mostly something that only guys deal with. And it can't really, it's not true. I mean, I don't know how else to say. It's just not true. Like, it's, as long as if women and disordered gambling are not discussed, then women who are battling disordered gambling are not going to discuss it. There are many, just looking at the numbers, there are more men that struggle with it, but the numbers are absolutely 100% skewed. It's difficult for me to really discuss this because in any other aspect, I'm almost like an anti-feminist. Like, women complain all the time about how they're not treated the same as men and they're held back and this and that. And I feel like as long as women feel that they're treated differently and complain about it, they will continue to be treated differently. This is the only area where I feel that women don't get equal representation and actually should probably be treated just the same as men. We tend to be better at keeping secrets and better at hiding things. And that's the reason that it stays so, I guess, in the dark or, hidden. So just, I think it's important to mention that as well.
Yeah. And that's another great reason I'm so happy that you're on here, because you're sharing the story. Kind of, you're bringing that awareness to it, that it's not
Absolutely.
just a guy's problem.
I hope that other women will either be willing to talk more about their own struggles, or that they'll at least advocate for changes, or they'll put themselves out there. Or if nothing else, that they just won't feel so alone by hearing somebody else being willing to discuss their experiences.
Yeah. And I guess, are they the ads and the prevention campaigns that you feel like don't really focus on it? Or is it just the studies? What specifically? I
think that the studies, at least a lot of the studies that I've looked over, and I've looked over quite a few of them, the entire premise, like the entire scope of the study, there's no gender equality just right out of the gate. They tend to use middle-aged men as their litmus test for almost everything. Like, I don't think a lot of the studies really look into women and gambling. And when they do, it's usually either lottery tickets or slot play. And some of the worst disordered gambling that I've experienced were with female poker players who would end up, having a bad session and going to, or several of them, and they would go blow money at blackjack or other casino games. So, I think that there's just the study groups are just not, it's not representative of women. And then I think there's just a complete and total unawareness that there needs to be more of a focus on women in this area. Thinking about it, I've never seen any studies focused directly on the role of females in gambling or gambling with females. I think it's just a lack of thought, concern. I don't know. I'll say this, and I've heard you talk about this before. I think that you and I and people that are doing what we're doing, we are in the minority. And unfortunately, we have to scream the loudest to have our voices heard. Those that have been through it, people that are going through this type of situation, we should have the loudest, strongest voices. And when lawmakers are considering how to change the way that they're handling problem gambling or private companies or whomever, they should look to us to talk about our experiences and to tell them what the community needs and to tell them how to go about reform. And unfortunately, the people that are making decisions on how to handle whether lawmaking or treatment or any of this stuff are people that they don't have experience at all with any of the things that we went through. Like, we scream so loud and our voices are just not heard. It's kind of remarkable. And, so long as there's a stigma with the way that problem gamblers are viewed, we'll never really be able to evoke sizable changes. You and I know better. We are more or less good people that made bad decisions. But the way that we're viewed is that we're questionable people who made horrible decisions. And why should we be given any responsibility to try and reform, the way any of this is handled? It's super, super unfortunate. Unless we continue to really, really push for things to change, and we have to refuse kind of to take no for an answer, nothing will ever change. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but...
No, absolutely. And
I don't know.
This is one of those things, my wife and I have this discussion quite often about the internet. Is it good or bad? And you can go both ways on this. And my argument always for having a positive outlook is that the internet has allowed you and I to do this, to have a bigger voice. And it's something that, this didn't happen for me on day one. I'm 7.5 years into my recovery before I'm starting this and getting out. So I understand that everybody has a different timeline and ability to kind of, like you say, scream the loudest. And so hopefully we're starting to kind of lead that. And I think even just, big picture in our country, we have more celebrities and high profile people talking about different mental health issues. So this is something that's coming to the forefront in our society. We're way behind the times, But hopefully, you and I and all the others that are kind of getting their story out. And that's why I encourage anybody that wants to come on, share your story, create your own stuff. It's easy. Create a blog, create a podcast, create anything, because the more of us that do it, the more that there will be that awareness. And I know from my personal life, there are certain things that as you meet people and you start to get to know, okay, their struggles and their battles. And when you have that personal connection or some kind of understanding, like I say, from listening to a podcast, all of a sudden you can appreciate it and you understand it a little more. I think it's just a lack of, I hate to say it, but there's a lack of people out there and content for people that are creating ads or legislation to find and to actually learn about it. So they kind of go to the old school methods and thought processes and just kind of the prevailing belief that, like you say, we're untrustworthy people, or we were just bad at managing money, or it's just our personal problem. It's not actually a disease or a disorder.
Absolutely.
So no, I 100% agree with that.
Another thing, and I don't want to divert too much, but I think this is for those that share kind of like the same sentiments that we share about what we just talked about. For me to feel like I'm accomplishing something and for me to be most productive, I had to really not focus on like the similarities that I had with just a couple people, like, how we share the poker thing and some of the other small things that we have in common. I had to really, for me to start feeling a level of satisfaction with my own recovery, it was important for me to begin to help other people, not so much even compulsive gamblers, but just people like me that were dealing with addiction issues and wanted to do something about it and wanted to help people and didn't know where to go or what to do. And so for me, it was important that I look outside of my own addiction and try and understand like what it's like for an alcoholic and what it's like for somebody that abuses drugs. And I started a project with two friends. One of them is a recovering heroin addict. One of them is a recovering alcoholic. And by kind of like being able to open my mind up to basically like the same underlying issue, just manifesting itself differently through different addictions. It's been so helpful for me to really understand what's going on with me on a whole different level. I think it's helpful. I never want to tell anybody how they should recover, because the last thing I want is somebody telling me what I need to do to be properly, and I use this loosely, properly recovered. But I think it's really beneficial for people with substance abuse issues or compulsive gambling or whatever it may be to like reach outside of their own methods for recovery and try something new. Like I've been to AA meetings. I actually went to a couple Heroin Anonymous meetings. It's really, really interesting if you can just kind of break out of just, your basic everyday ways of thinking. It's extremely, extremely interesting. I don't know, just another thought. Like I think it's important that addiction be looked at like from a hierarchy, like a hierarchical type of structure. Like, addiction is the big parent to all of these smaller little children issues. And I think we have to kind of get to know our siblings a little bit to really understand and try and effectively treat what's going on. So just another thought.
No, I would call that a great life tip even, right? I mean, one of my favorite things is to switch shoes. And I don't know where I read this in a book a long time ago, and I try and do this frequently, and it's switch shoes with the person. I mean, if you were in their situation, what would you think? What would you do? Well, how would you feel? I think it allows us to have empathy and to understand somebody else's point of view that might be completely different than ours by just switching shoes, putting yourself in their situation. So I think that's an awesome life tip.
Absolutely. And it helps us, it really, for people, at least like me, I know, like I mentioned earlier, I became so entitled over the period of time that I was out of control that attending meetings that are completely foreign to me with groups of people that I are also completely foreign to me, it's humbling. And it kind of it brings you back down to earth and takes you back down to size. And it's just so incredibly, incredibly helpful. I think it's eye-opening. It's really eye-opening. What it also does is, at least for me, so I never was much of a drinker, ever, ever, ever. But I've walked into AA meetings and sat through them and listened to the stories. And I've thought to myself, oh my God, like I am so grateful that I only had my problems to deal with. It's like that whole notion of like, I'd rather have all of my problems for the rest of my life than somebody else's problems for a day. It really makes you grateful when you hear some of the horrible things other people have went through. Makes you grateful for what you actually have. And I can't suggest enough that once you reach a comfortable place in your own recovery, that you kind of branch out and take advantage of things like that. Another thing that I would recommend for people that are just getting started with recovery or are finding it difficult for themselves to get to meetings, there is a website called intherooms.com, and there is a very robust group of video meetings. In fact, I am at this point, and I'll just put this out there for anybody listening, I am not a 12-step. I know a lot about 12-step programs. I don't stand behind necessarily a strict dictum of following them. But I benefit from just being around them. I don't want to get too into it, but I deal with some issues with higher power and whatnot. So I don't listen as attentively as some other people do, and I don't take from it as much as some other people do, but it's just therapeutic for me to be around them. This intherooms.com, like over 24 hours a day, there are so many different types of meetings. It's literally as easy as pulling it up on your cell phone or on a computer screen, and you can attend a meeting just like that. You can try different fellowships meetings. For anybody that just wants to figure out where they're at with their own addiction, it's a great tool for kind of figuring things out. And it's totally anonymous. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to activate the microphone. You don't have to activate the camera on your phone. If you choose to, you can, but you don't have to. So anybody that is looking for something like that, it does exist.
That's awesome. I appreciate you bringing that up. I've seen that before, but I've never actually done it. So I'll have to do that and check it out.
It's great. It's great. So awesome. I have, a endless, like, just list of tools like that. So if anybody ever needs tools or, a place to go, get a hold of Jamie, and Jamie will get a hold of me, and I'm happy to help in any way possible. There are so many resources. You just have to know how to access them. The resources that are really good and the people that are really out there trying are really out there trying. And the things are there. You have to ask for them.
Absolutely. So, Michelle, I guess let's wrap up with a couple of things. I want to get to two different parts, which is one, let's first dive into kind of what brought you into recovery. I don't know. I don't want to say a low point, but for most of it is a low point. I know some people go out on a high, but kind of lead us through that a little bit.
Okay. It was a combination of several different things, but overall, I never had any really financial bottoming out. I was a winning poker player. Towards the end, as things really progressed and got out of control, I was actually playing full time, and that was my mode of income for actually the last 2 years. I just didn't like the place I was at, let's say. I was playing online. I was playing 18 tables at a time. And then, occasionally 2 days a week, I would be out playing live at the casino. I had no regular hours, no time to spend with my family. I was in a new relationship that I wanted it to work. And to be honest with you, more than anything else, I just got tired. I just got tired of all of it. And some of my decision-making was less than wise and good towards the end. And I knew I was out of control, and I knew that I couldn't even do this halfway anymore, because anytime that I would try and put like any sorts of parameters or rules on myself that I intended to follow, I'd break all my own rules. Like if I said, well, I'm just going to hop onto the internet and play in this one tournament, that would turn into 2 days later and either winning or losing sizable amounts of money, and my self-respect and dignity just shot. So like I said, I just got tired, and I woke up one day and looked at my partner and I said, it's time. I don't know how I'm going to do this or what I need to do, but I have to be done. And it just so happened he's been in and out of AA for 15 years. And in the last, I'd say, year and a half or so, he has not been in AA, and he had been struggling with some of his own addiction issues, just drinking and whatnot. And we made a decision to do it together. And we've, it's almost like a friendly competition between the two of us. It's extremely healthy, and it was time. It was more or less just time.
No, and I'm sure that's extremely helpful, having someone else that, like, it goes back to that empathy, right? Somebody that understands, that truly, truly understands.
So it is, but also for as much as in this is probably something others have experienced, and you've probably experienced this, somebody that has a substance abuse issue versus somebody that has a process abuse issue, they have a lot of the same underlying issues, but it's harder to really understand how things devolve for us because you don't see like the physical manifestations of substance abuse issues in people that have process issues. So, and I'm guessing you probably experienced this too. Like when you look at somebody with a substance abuse issue, your mind tells you, and this is incorrect, but your mind tells you that like, you know, they're not in control. It's the drugs are the problem. But when you look at somebody with a process issue, like your knee-jerk reaction is whatever their affliction is a choice. Like whether it's shopping addiction or food addiction or gambling addiction, that, you know, we're making a choice. Whereas somebody with a substance abuse issue is not making a choice. At the end of the day, none of us are making this choice. This is not a choice. So in my relationship, it's difficult for him to understand that, like, when I've made poor financial decisions, that stems from this disorder. It's not I don't know, poor thinking or like, you know, irresponsibility. It all comes from the same place. Whereas like drinking and driving are obviously related, and you know, it's tangible. With us, it's not so much the case. So that's something I've had to that's the cross I've had to bear. But generally speaking, you're right. There's a level of empathy that a lot of people don't have.
But you are right. And I have experienced people do view it differently. Like you say, kind of the process addiction versus substance abuse. It definitely is. I mean, I don't think it's right. And I don't think you think it's right, but we do kind of experience different feedback from people, I'd say. So one other question I have for you, you mentioned that you're a winning poker player. And that's something I think a lot of us, especially in the poker area, look back and say, okay, I was a winning poker player. I just needed to cut out like the excess thing, the sports betting or playing blackjack or playing on tilt after too many hours. When you roll it all together and look at your gambling as a whole, I mean, is it still kind of the rosy picture of the winning, or is it kind of, do you have like, I guess is your sum total a win or a loss?
So I gained a lot of things in the period of time that I was playing. Like, you know, I've made friends that, you know, I still, even though I don't see on a regular basis, I talk to every day. They will be my friends for the rest of my life. So some of the relationships have been amazing. Other than that, here's what it is. There are two different schools of thought. It's either the easiest way to make a hard dollar or the hardest way to make an easy dollar. Whatever the mentality is, whichever one of those it is, it's nothing more than that. It's like if you want to feel like you achieved something in life, don't take the shortcut. Go the long way and, you know, do things the way that everybody else has to do them. I think that for a very long time, this allowed me to kind of like take shortcuts and do things in a way I thought was effective. It wasn't. I think that gambling, and especially people that are winning players, they carry that type of mentality for a very long time. I think gambling is very dangerous in that way. It invokes those feelings in people. So it's hard for me to just give you a solid answer. I think if people can use gambling as a recreational bonding tool, it's overall a good thing. I just don't know anybody that can do that. It's almost like a spectrum disorder. Like there are varying degrees of compulsive behavior amongst gamblers. I've never show me a healthy gambler and I'll be able to answer that question for you. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's not about how much money I won or lost. It's how much life I lost. And I can't, for as many good things that I've taken away from it, I can never replace some of the things that I lost. So to me, it has to be a net loss, even if it's a financial win. So I hope that answers more or less what you're asking.
No, I think that absolutely does. And it's kind of that whole looking at the full picture. And I mean, I was probably starting with it from the financial, but I'm glad that you answered it as kind of the whole life answer, because it is so true that, I mean, I find that I personally used to just cherry pick the good things, right? I mean, and that was what kept me gambling was, hey, I know I can sit down and make money playing poker. I was a good poker player. But I try to just cherry pick those things and say, well, and next time I just will get rid of, the dumping it into not a slot machine, a roulette machine or something like that, just trying to make it back quick if I lose, or I won't play as long. And I see this kind of consistently, especially in the poker area, but I think it's with everybody, is we try and cherry pick those big things and say, okay, I was good at this part of it, I just wasn't good at that part. And I think that's part of what keeps us in it so long. And I kind of equate it to like saying, hey, I'm winning at my diet because I eat a salad for lunch, but then you go have like 2 burgers and fries and all that other stuff. And it's like,
right,
you got to look at the full picture. You can't just cherry pick one piece. And so for me, that's something that has been really kind of an eye-opening thing for me, is to say, look, in an ideal world, yeah, I would just go and I would sit and I would leave before I'm tired. I'd play in short spells. I do all those things that I always aspired to do. But the reality is that no, I'll play for days on end, and then I'll play tired, and then I'll go on tilt, and then I'll try and get it back quickly, and then I'll run up, credit card debt and all these other things. So I guess that's the thing. And it's just for the people out there, if you think one area is something that you're good at or you win at, I would just challenge that thought. Just try and force yourself to think like big picture. And like Michelle said, add in the life aspects. What are you missing from life? What are you missing from your family experiences? What are you missing from work? I mean, how much opportunity have you left on the table at work because you're gambling? And so I guess that was just my thought, is just look at the full picture.
I agree. And, this is for me. And listen, I don't want to tell anybody or even suggest to anybody else how they should go about this. But something that was helpful for me was, and something that was also uncomfortable, the first GA meeting that I went to, I heard 2 of the other gentlemen in the group talking about how they were going out for drinks after, and that was what they did after their Monday night meeting. They would go out and have a couple beers. And I thought, well, again, since drinking was never a problem for me, do I really need to cut out drinking? And maybe it's because of my home life, but maybe it's also because of my wanting to change my entire life, not just this aspect of it. I made the decision to cut out drinking also. It's never been more important for me to have a glass of wine than it is for me to not have it in the house, or whatever the case may be. I think if you really want to focus on recovering your entire life, you kind of have to take a sober approach to almost every single thing that you do. And again, I don't want to preach to anybody, but just fixing the one problem leaves you open to replacing that problem with something else. If you set out to say, well, I'm not going to gamble, but I'm also not going to use drugs or drink, then you kind of limit how much other addictive or degenerative behavior you involve yourself in. Just a thought.
No, I like that a lot. And I think this whole interview has been awesome. I mean, it's been obviously much more of just discussion, and that's one of the things I really want to do. And I'm looking forward, for those of you out there that have enjoyed this, I'm looking forward to hopefully having Michelle on more frequently in the future. And so, yeah, looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea, for sure. I would look forward to it.
And so, Michelle, I guess let's wrap this up by sharing, you got into it a little bit earlier, let people know where they can find you, and also about the other project that you're working on right now. Sure.
So I mentioned that I am involved in a project with 2 other gentlemen that are in recovery. Our website is dailysober.com, and you can just take a look at some of the things that we have been working on. We also have a podcast, it's on hold right now, but We hope to continue with that in the future. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me at dailysober@outlook.com. That's more or less where you can find me. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media platforms. Just look for Daily Sober.
Awesome. And I will link up those links in the show notes, and definitely go check out Daily Sober if you want to reach out, especially the females out there. Like we were talking earlier, we know that you're underrepresented. And so here's a great opportunity. And Michelle kind of hooked you up with her email address and contact information. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you and to hear your story.
Absolutely. I can't say it enough. Even if you just need to know what to do, what the next step is, get a hold of me, get a hold of Jamie. You're not alone. Whatever it is that you're going through, you're not the first person and you're not the only person. That's all that I can't say it enough.
And I can't say it any better. So I think that's an awesome way to just wrap this episode up. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
You've had so much great information for everybody. Everybody, if you have any information or feedback for Michelle, for myself, let us know. What'd you think about this? And we look forward to seeing you in a future episode.
Thanks, Jamie.
Now, before you go, I'd like to go over a few very important things. First of all, I think it's important to remember that problem gambling is a treatable disorder. There's no scientific evidence or study that suggests that this is just a terminal condition and that we're going to be forced to deal with the negative side effects and results of our actions for the rest of our lives. And so while I know that in the moment it feels like this is something that you're going to be struggling with for the rest of your life, science just doesn't back that up. Recovery is real, but we just need to seek out treatment. And so that brings me to point number 2, which is that help is available. Many of the states here in the United States actually offer free counseling and therapy for not only gamblers, but family members as well. And so you just need to know that these programs are available. And the best way to start finding out more information is to call the hotline number. And that's 1-800-522-4700. Again, that's 1-800-522-4700. And this is the number run by the National Council on Problem Gambling. And so it covers all 50 states. And they're going to have information and be able to start to guide you on the path to seek out help in the area where you live. And these hotlines aren't just available here in the United States. They're available around the world. So just simply open up a web browser, type in gambling help, gambling hotline, and you'll be able to find the information for your local area. In addition to the hotlines, there are numerous places where you can find gambling support and information online. If you go to gamblingstillsucks.com/help, I'll list some of these things, and I'll continue to add to this as I find new resources, whether they're chat groups or online forums or just great information. So again, that was gamblingstillsucks.com/help. As a disclaimer, this podcast does not provide legal or medical advice. Look, I'm not a doctor, a therapist, or an attorney. I'm just a guy who had a gambling problem. So while we'll discuss a lot of topics and I'll provide a lot of insight into what's worked for me, please seek out the help of a professional. Go visit a lawyer, a doctor, or a therapist to help you deal with your gambling problem. The information that we discuss is for informational purposes and should not be taken as professional legal or medical advice. And reliance on the information appearing on the podcast is solely at your own risk. The music for this podcast is Something Elated by Broke for Free and licensed under the Creative Commons.